my name is Lorraine of District 32, and I have the absolute privilege of having a conversation and interview with the infamous Simon Bowen. How are you, Simon?
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
We're in Perth. How could it be anything but great?
We are paradise. I remind myself of that every day, paradise. So before we get into this interview, Simon, I would love to just give a little bit of a tiny glimpse of who you are to our listeners. You've spent over 2 decades facilitating the resolution of complex issues. Sure. Now that's your superpower, yeah? Taking the complexity of a model of a sale and making it simple through your own IP that you've generated, called the models method. You've worked for cities, you've done plans for cities, you've worked for shipping companies, you fly all over the world to present, to facilitate, and you're a well sought after business, I was going to say man of mystery there, but businessman of mystery. And like Simon, I'm just going to finish off there as well, because you are in Perth and we're in Perth, we have the absolute privilege of inviting you to speak at some of our events, whereas other people don't get that opportunity. And we have also worked with you ourselves on developing our models, and that has just been an absolute game changer for our own business. So Simon, welcome.
Thank you very, very much.
So what I'd like to cover, just to set the scene for our listeners, is we want to get a little bit of knowing as who's Simon.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you what you think or what you see as the common mistakes that business owners make today. Sure. And then we're going to talk about your magic and the magic of models in that whole process. So Simon, why did you get started in models? What kick-started that?
Look, it's a great question, and I've thought about it a lot because it's an unusual thing. It's not a normal way for people to think and communicate, and yet it is probably one of the most powerful systems for thinking and influence I've ever actually come across, is the ability to think through a framework and then have that framework become a primary influencing tool. But I grew up in the country in Western Australia, and so if you had to travel to someone's farm, someone would just grab a bit of paper and draw a mud map, or if my father or one of his, 9 siblings were going to make something, out of timber or steel or whatever, they'd grab a bit of paper and sketch out a rough picture, and then they would follow that, right? And then in my early working life, I worked in electronics, and you can't diagnose anything in electronics without a circuit diagram. So I guess my brain got used to the transition between an idea and reality is almost always has its first physical appearance in the world as a drawing on paper. So everything that you and I are using, all the technology and everything that you and I are using, it's their first physical manifestation was a drawing on paper. And so I started working in electronics, then I lectured in TAFE and at university, and then stepped into kind of corporate roles in both government and big business and executive management roles. And I recognized that it's for all people to understand complex and contentious ideas. And a lot of people sell not just a complex product, but a complex and contentious product. And it's contentious because the average customer today comes to you already cynical, already suspicious, already wanting to do a level of subconscious due diligence. And you've got to get past that before you can actually make the sale. So almost all sales are complex and contentious, and the human brain needs a blueprint that sits between the idea and reality. And I just started communicating by drawing in front of people, drawing models and things. And if I've got 200 people, the government sends me into a room, and we've got 200 people who are at war over an issue, but they're unified in their hatred for us. You've got 2 hours to get them to agree. I forged a reputation for being able to do that, but the formula was simple. I would just frustrate them for 3/4 of the available time. So for 90 minutes, I'd go, what do you think? Oh, that's a good idea. What do you think? Oh, that's a good idea. What do you think? Oh, that's a good idea. And catch all this stuff on flip charts, and everyone's getting frustrated because they don't feel like we're going anywhere. And then I'd go to the whiteboard and go, I think I can draw this for you. And people have a really deep connection to drawing, because that's we drew when we were little kids. They were bad drawings, but we got great reward for that, right? It's the original language, hieroglyphics and Aboriginal cave art and things like that. So the moment I'd say, I can draw this for you, everyone sits up. And then I'd get them to help me build the model. And people can't disagree with the model they've helped to build. And so in the last half hour, we'd get an agreement out of this, and everyone go, why didn't we just build the model at the start? But we didn't have the energy in the room to build the model. We didn't have enough tension in the room. We had to get to tension first. And I just thought, I assumed everybody communicated and facilitated like this because it made so much sense to me. But it turns out now, since we've sort of started the models method, and this is how I've worked for 25 years as a corporate management consultant. But it turns out it's not what everybody does. And so we started the models method and it's exploded. We've got people using models in 30 countries and 8 languages, and they just ended up being phenomenal sales tools, phenomenally powerful sales tools. So I hear conversations in models now when I read books, and then I draw a model to summarize the book. Right? So it's interesting.
And I've watched you do it. I've heard you take an idea, a conversation from a concept or a conversation right there at that moment and draw. And we're visual as human beings. We're much more visual than we are auditory. And it's like poetry in motion. And I think we mentioned before in a previous interview, Simon, you've created a new language, even though you hate to say it. Remember that? Yeah,
it's well, I think one of the greatest compliments I got, I was speaking at one of Ryan Dyche's events, and I can't remember if it was a digital marker event or one of his Warren events. And in his introduction, he said, our next speaker has created a new vocabulary for business.
Wow.
And then he kind of launched, I thought, that's a nice line. So I said, you need to let me use that in marketing. He said, have at it, for sure. So, but it is a vocabulary all of its own. It brings such a level of transparency to the conversation. And that's a really big deal. It's you and I have spoken about this. Transparent. I think selling was rooted in the industrial age, right? Foot in the door selling, high pressure, manipulative. Then we went through the whole NLP thing, using linguistic patterns and stuff like that to, the multiple yes close and all of this sort of thing. But we live in a world today where people they're onto it. People know when they're being sold to. And people want to buy profound and authentic, much more than, stack of bonuses that you're never going to use and things like that. And so transparency is a superpower, because everybody comes to you. And is it all right if I draw?
Absolutely.
And please I just might have to see if I can. Yes, I can share screens. And so one of the things that happens when people come to you, we know that above the line, people need to be able to believe you. And that's fair enough. And then they have to be able to believe you in order to be able to trust you. And so, a lot of the traditional thinking is that in order to make the sale up here somewhere, you need to be believable and trustworthy and get people to trust you. But there's a part that we don't talk about, and it's the part below the line. And if you don't deal with this, the bit above the line never gets to open up for you. And the bit below the line is that the customer is doing what I call their own subconscious due diligence on you. Do I like, trust, respect, and believe you enough to even want to get into a conversation? What are other people saying about you? Does this thing sound like it would work? Would it work for me? And if we don't address that, we don't even get to be above the line. But one of the fastest ways to address it, honestly, is transparency. Go into the sale with nothing to hide and make it clear that you're wanting to have a conversation with them with nothing to hide. And if you're right for them and they're right for you, and there's a compelling offer there that they can afford, they'll buy from you. And if those conditions don't exist, then I don't want to sell to you, because it would be disingenuous, it would be dishonest, it would be manipulative, particularly if I think there's a better solution for you somewhere else. I can't tell you how many people we've told are not right for what we do, who then start negotiating for what do they need to do to be right for what we do, which is fascinating. So we're selling to them and they're trying to force us to to let them buy from us. So transparency is a big deal, this whole idea of due diligence. And the moment you start to draw, the transparency level just goes through the roof, because it's all there in front of you. Here's the other thing. I could have just told you, I just could have talked you through what I've just said over the last 5 minutes, and you would have forgotten the first thing I said. But everything I've just talked about is right there in front of you in a model that you can remember, and you'll take a screenshot of, or whatever the case might be. So if you had to go back and explain to other people in your business about this stuff, I've just turned you into an internal sales person for me and equipped you with sales tools, which I call models. It's a wildly powerful process. Now, I forgot what the question was that you asked me that pushed me off onto that pathway.
That's all right, because that was one of the nuggets that we wanted to take anyway, away. So what I was asking you, just how did you get into models?
Yes.
Yeah. And then you showed me, you demonstrated, the magic of the models, and one of the things we want to talk about was transparency in the sale. And that comes a lot from other wisdom that you've shared. I've seen you share over the years on the importance of buyer safety.
Yeah.
And how do we create that?
Well, everyone's only buying two things. We're all selling the same two things, and we just package it in different products. And the two things that everybody's buying from you is to make them safe. Now, people aren't inherently safe. So people smoke, they drink, they drive cars too fast, they jump off cliffs, they go bungee jumping, they do things that put them at risk all the time. They eat unhealthily, whatever. People are not inherently safe by their own actions, but they want someone or something else to make them safe. They want the government or the company or whatever to make them safe, right? And so the first thing people are buying from you is this idea of safety. Do I feel safer with you than I do with any other option? And so buyer safety is this simple, complex concept of, in a sequence, in a sales sequence or a marketing sequence, I need to feel safer with you at every step than I would with anyone else, so that the safest thing for me to do is to actually commit and buy from you. The second thing, and there's kind of some levels of safety, which in the interest of time I can talk through, and there's a model for it. I won't draw that because I'm sure there's other things I'll end up drawing. But the second thing everyone's buying is everyone actually wants to win. They just don't want to admit it. So they want a better car than their neighbours. They want a better house than their neighbours. They want a stronger business than their colleagues and buddies. They want to beat that health issue that they're challenged with. They want to beat that weight loss challenge that they've got. And everybody wants to win, whatever the win is for them. So when people are buying from us, they're buying, make me safe, even though I may act inherently unsafely, and give me a framework that's going to let me win, a proven, reliable, repeatable framework. In other words, a model for how you do what you do that's going to let me win in the context of what you do. I'm going to be able to win against the challenge, whatever that challenge might be. And so, how do we make people safe? The first level of buyer safety is safety in anonymity. People want to be able to check you out without you even knowing they exist, because everyone's got the fear of the used car salesman syndrome. If you know my name, you're going to hound me until the day I die, right? So they want to be able to check you out from the safety of anonymity, which is, I want to go to your website. I want to see what you've got out in the marketplace. Now, I don't think content marketing and authority-based positioning, and my views on that, don't call yourself a thought leader, I don't think that's, the most powerful form of marketing. However, content allows them to check you out without you even knowing they exist. And then they want to partially put their hand up, and they know you're going to know that they exist in the world, but they don't want to be too exposed yet. So they want safety in numbers. So connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me join your mailing list. I'll talk to you one-to-one when I want to, but can I hang out and get some of the extra special stuff, right? Can I? And so webinars, when we run webinars and things like that, that's like safety in numbers. And then when people decide it's time for them to raise their hand and go, actually, I want to have a one-to-one conversation with you, see how you could help me. We need to give them safety in process and privacy. So, hey, why don't you book a call? We let them be in control of the process, because they could always cancel the call if they want to. You know, people don't want to give up control, but we can let them have control through process and let them consume some deeper material around what we do in the privacy of their own home. You know, a car salesman that does not let, a couple talk privately between themselves about the car is not going to sell that car today. You know, when you come back from the test drive, get out of the way and let them talk about the car by themselves, because they want safety and privacy to talk about it. And then if you can offer all that to somebody and be really transparent about the sale, you reach this point where, you know what, the safest thing to do is for me to buy from you. And you can use, and there's a very simple little closing line that is so elegant and unpressured. And it's simply this, you know, look, I know that by now you already know whether this is right for you or not. And if it is right for you, the conversation we should have is about how we make that happen.
Love that, Simon.
That's
you just reminded me of a few things as well there along the process and the safety, so thank you.
And if it's not right for them, then let's not sell it to them, because people are past manipulation, you know. And, you know, this is the second point that we're talking about. It's actually about facilitating people through a process rather than selling people through a process or forcing people through a process. No one wants to buy under pressure. And no one wants to buy the salesperson's ego. They want to buy their own identity. Who do they become because they made this decision, right? They want to be the hero in their own story. How clever was I buying this from you, right? So no one wants to be pressured into a sale. None of us, when we're customers, want to meet the pressure salesperson. Why on earth would we become that when we're the seller? You know, so sell from presence, not pressure, you know.
So you spoke a little bit there, Simon, around having that facilitating the sale. And that's another term that I've heard you say, and I'd love you just to lean into that a little bit. Can you share with us, please, what you mean when you're talking about the concept of the independent facilitator?
Yeah, so there's really two things. The first thing is, you know, humans have an intensity about them, and it ranges from high to low. And then when we sell to them, we want to sell to them, you know, selling requires a certain amount of time and effort. And we want to get them to buy into our idea. We want to convert them to our idea. That's what conversion is. But humans are hardwired for resistance. So when anything new is put in front of somebody, they have an automatic system for saying no, and they have a high intensity about that. But at exactly the same time, they have no hardwiring for acceptance. And so they have no automatic system for saying yes. They have a low intensity around that. And so we fill this space with sales techniques, pressure-based selling techniques. And if you increase the pressure inside a closed vessel, you just push the sides further apart. Conversion is the process of these two curves reversing. The point of conversion occurs when the customer's acceptance curve is higher than the resistance curve, and they flip over. And so we can, instead of selling, which we're doing on the left-hand side, we can, out on this side, they haven't bought at this point, but they bought the idea. But now we can facilitate them towards the sale. Hey, here's what I know about you already. And if I've put models in front of people, I know that I can get to this point much faster. And I'll show why in a minute. But, you know, here's what I know about you already. You already know by now whether this is right for you or not. And if it's right for you, why don't we talk about what it might take and how we could make that happen? Now I'm in facilitation mode, right? And the reality is they are either going to be able to afford me or they're not.
Yeah.
And their affordability is not my responsibility. Their affordability is not my responsibility. So I might be outside the price range of some people in the marketplace. That's okay. Because I've got to drive my business, right? So we facilitate, don't sell. And facilitation is a simple process of, I have my truth, which is I've got this knowledge about this thing that I sell, and the customer has their truth, which means they're not feeling good about something. And the typical sales approach is to push my idea on them. And humans are taught to push back. Any kind of force causes a pushback. So we end up with this compete and retreat cycle. Now, we know that when two people are in any kind of conflict, even if it's subtle conflict, and the underlying tone of every sale is cynicism at the start, people need to get through their due diligence. We know that one of the things that you can do is put an independent mediator or facilitator in between the two who does not have an agenda. And that facilitator will say to the weaker of the two parties, if they're a good facilitator, they'll go to the least powerful of the two. In the sale, that's the customer. And they'll say, and they'll ask them, what's going on for you? Now, it's not this person they're having the conflict with asking, it's this independent facilitator. So they're likely to share and say, well, here's what's happening. And this person can then provide intel to the other party, who can then go, well, here's an insight they might not be aware of. And that's why they think that, but actually that's not right. And this person can go back and through the form of a question can say, well, but did you know? Oh, no, I didn't. They can share. Here's some more intel. Here's some more insight. And so you get this mediated conversation, right? And that conversation is a mix of discovery on this side and awareness on this side. And when you elevate any conversation like that, you elevate the value being talked about in the conversation. And this is facilitation 101. All great facilitation has the facilitator sitting at the corner of a triangle, being this impartial informer and mediator and discoverer and educator. And I recognize that you can't take a facilitator into a sales conversation with you. That would be weird. Now, in counseling, it's a real person, but you can't take a facilitator into a sale with you. And so I realized that I could put a model in between and let the model ask the question and let them inform information into the model. And then that gives me intel, oh, they're interested in that particular part of it. Were you aware of this insight? And the model becomes the mediator. And when that happens, everything changes. That makes some sense.
It makes beautiful sense. I love it. It brings in the safety. It just, yeah, it's beautiful.
It covers off a bunch of stuff.
And it does, you know, I've seen it work, you know, talking to a model. I've taken what you've taught and put it into practice, and it's like magic. People are not confronted with that face-to-face eye contact either when you're both working on a model. They're drawing it.
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
filling in the blanks. So there's no resistance to their own information on a model. It's beautiful.
There's a really important point that sits underneath this. That I have to mention, and that is that to drive greater transparency and to facilitate people through a sale, you need to have done a depth of thinking about what you take to the market that goes 2 or 3 levels down deeper than everybody else in the marketplace. It's not about product design or product features or anything else like that. It's the paradigm shifts that get created. What are the really powerful, profound paradigm shifts that you create when you work with clients? And that's scary for a lot of people, getting to that depth of thinking. You know, the common feedback from people when they work with us is, my head hurts. I've never thought about my business this deeply before. But the models are the first job of models is to drive much deeper thinking than anyone else in the marketplace. And then the model becomes a really powerful aligning framework for everyone in the business. So now everybody in the business has that depth of thinking, and now you really can be transparent, because the customer is almost never going to have done the amount of thinking about this that you've done. So you've always got another level to take them to. You know, sexy sells every day of the week, but profound outsells sexy every single day of the week.
And I will vouch for that. When you helped us do our genius model, you think business networking, you know, how many different variations and how deep can you go? And once we'd finished the model, what we had was a really in-depth value proposition. I was like, holy moly, this is profound. And we better get to work to create all this stuff to give it the weighting that it desired. But it's phenomenal, the impact. And it is a bit of a wow when you know, when customers see it. But Simon, I am aware of the time in here as well, and I would love for people to introduce people to your work, because I have massive respect for you and how you work, and the teachings. We had a conversation just before this, and you blew my mind just on that. So I'd love to introduce people to you and how you work. Now, again, you've innovated the Zoom meetings, and you're doing what we call a 20-minute teaching, which is everybody can spare 20 minutes, right? Can you just give us a bit of a snapshot of what we learn in these 20-minute meetings, so that we can get people introduced and we can ask them to join your database for more information?
Well, every business, so, you know, something you and I talked about a long time ago, or that I shared with you a long time ago, is that, you know, most businesses don't drive sales enough. And anything that you spend on delivery is overcapitalization in your business if you haven't matched it in sales. The only thing that drives absolute business certainty is revenue certainty, and revenue certainty that comes from an exchange of value. Money into the business through borrowings or capital raising or things like that don't drive long-term sustainability. It's revenue that comes from the exchange of value, so sales. And so, you know, everyone uses webinars and things like that, and they're usually based on, oh, we've got an event coming up, or, you know, we've got you know, an X program coming up, or whatever. I wanted to create a, you know, a solution for our community of people that you know, who are following our stuff and know what we do, where people could get one thing covered that they could take out and use in sales straight away, because I want to keep people focused on their sales, right? And I thought, I want my own TED Talk. And I thought, I actually want my own TED Talk platform. And there's a reason why TED Talks are 19 to 20 minutes long. And so I created what I call the 20-minute teaching. It's a monthly 20-minute teaching. And we just open up our team Zoom room. We've got a large team Zoom room, hundreds of people can come in. There's no registration required. We just notify people on the notification list that here's the link for the next 20-minute teaching. Show up and join us. When the room is full, it's full. And we don't sell anything on the 20-minute teaching. I start a little clock in the bottom right corner. I set the context, and then I start a little clock for 20 minutes. And then I just go for it for 20 minutes. And I draw models, and I teach one topic, one thing that might help people in their selling that month. And it's become our most popular thing by a long way, because it's just 20 minutes, right? And then you're in and out. And then we match that up with our, I do a twice weekly email, where we do sometimes promote our own things inside the emails, but the vast majority of the emails are just great content and ideas shared with people. And, you know, the easiest way for people to get more of this stuff actually is to, you know, join our
mailing list
subscription for the email and 20-minute teaching notifications. And I can get a link to you.
Yeah, do that, and we'll put it in the comments of this video. And and even if something you've learned before, there's always something like you've shared with me today that you're reminded of. So yeah, I love it. So I highly recommend getting onto the 20-minute teachings if anybody's serious about growing their business or driving sales. And I'm also going to say we're really excited about having you speak at our conference in August as well. Simon, again, massive privilege being here in Perth. So Simon, I'm very conscious of your time. Thank you very much for sharing your time, your wisdom, and, you know, some of your IP around models with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been my pleasure too. Thanks, Lorraine.
Thanks very much, Simon.